I was in the abortion clinic for the second time. I got really sick to my stomach. I couldn't go through with it. I got up and I walked out and I chose to have you.
Hey guys, and welcome to today's very exciting episode of Tea Talk. I do have my tea. I feel like I need to start telling guests, like, bring tea if you drink tea.
You do, yeah.
I do. And so I'm here today. She doesn't have her tea, but I have mine. You can pretend you're kind of partaking. I don't know, I'm very weird. But I'm here today with Miss Ashley Bratcher, and I'm so excited to have you not only on the channel, but just to be talking with you. I told my husband last night, so we rewatched Unplanned over the last couple nights. And I told him, I'm like, man, it's so weird that I'm finally talking to Ashley, because I remember when I saw that movie in theaters and I sent you a message, I was like, I have to connect with this chick. Like, I was so moved by the film and your telling of Abby's story. It's just very surreal now, like a few years later, here we are finally connecting, and I'm just excited that you're here. So Ashley Bratcher, everyone.
Well, likewise, the feeling is mutual, Nikki. I've been following you for quite some time, so I was really happy to connect and to be able to talk to you actually face to face, kind of. The first
Instead
time.
of our voice messages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so excited to connect and to hear about not only the projects that you're working on in the future, because if you guys follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen me share some of what Ashley's working on. We're going to be talking about her project Pharma. I also just want to talk about acting and production and how you got into all of this, as well as a little bit of Unplanned. So is there anywhere you want to start, or should I just take it away, or anything you want to say at the top?
I think it's best to start with Unplanned because that's where it kind of all unfolded and shifted my career. So I'll let you take the lead from there, and that's where we'll kind of, I guess, stem off from.
Okay. So this I obviously is going to lead into Unplanned. I'm assuming you were acting before that. How did you get into acting?
It's so random.
I like those stories.
I had done a little bit of acting in high school. Just drama club and whatnot, but I didn't think that it was really something I could pursue outside of high school, that it was just kind of a hobby. I grew up in rural North Carolina. There was really nothing going on there. And so when I went off to college, I went to Campbell University. I studied graphic design. My senior year, I needed an extra elective. It was a liberal arts school. And so I took an acting class just to fill that elective spot. And it reignited that fire for me. And I was really close to graduating. And I just thought, well, I'm about to get this degree. I can do whatever I want with my life. And now's the time to decide. I went to the North Carolina State Fair on a date with who is my husband now. And there was this booth and it said, do you want to be an actor?
What?
And, no, it's great. And I was like, yeah, why not?
I want to be an actor.
I auditioned for this commercial. I ended up booking it. From there, I signed with an agent who took me in New York City. I got a bunch of contract offers in New York to sign with managers there. So as soon as I graduated, got my degree, I moved up to New York City. And that was where I initially started studying, working like 3 jobs, auditioning. Wow. It was madness. I was way too young and immature to be there. Honestly, I'd never left North Carolina, just small town girl.
Whoa.
Yeah. By myself for the first time, not really ready. I feel like the city really did kind of eat me up. I was a little bit rebellious and wild at the time, didn't know Jesus that well.
Yeah. Cities can do that.
It's a place in an industry that can really wear on your self-esteem if you don't have a sense of identity. And at that time, I was placing my worth in my success as an actress, or finding success in my career. And when I wasn't doing that and being successful, then I started to sink into this depression. And from there started drinking heavily. I mean, all these things happened in my life. I felt like it kind of crumbled around me to the point that I ended up leaving New York and coming back home. There's a whole kind of sob story in between, but my grandmothers were the ones who took me in after that, helped me get back on my feet, and lots of other things happened from there.
You know, it's what you said about it eating up your identity. I was just talking to my husband about that the other night because I just finished reading or listening to Jeanette McCurdy's book, I'm glad my mom died. That's what it's called. It's intense. And it's definitely not a PG book. Like it ramps up because she writes with her age. So as she gets older, it gets less PG. But anyways, point being, she talks about the rejection of the industry. And she's a very different situation because she was a child. And from the way that she told her story, her mom really forced her into it. And I just said to Dan, I'm like, I can't even imagine handling that kind of rejection if I hadn't even chosen to go into it, because the rejection in just the entertainment industry in general and the judgment around like your looks, just kind of superficial stuff can really be, it can really wear on you. So it's not surprising to hear that took a hold of you, especially if you weren't in like deep relationship with the Lord. So that's very interesting. So it really ate you alive, and your grandma's brought you home.
Yeah. I mean, going back to that sense of identity, right? I think even beyond being a Christian, just women in general and young girls are struggling in today's society with figuring out their worth. And I think that it's been cheapened through so many things like social media and this kind of instant gratification life. That and I mean, pop culture and television and media, it's kind of destroyed the value that women find in themselves and their worth. So beyond just what scripture tells us that we are worth, I think it's important to be an example to other women that you are valuable, that, you know, you don't have to sell your soul to get where you want to be and things like that. But in New York, I had really kind of reached the lowest of lows. My boyfriend, my high school sweetheart, and I had broken up, and on top of like everything else and all this failure, I was just devastated. I ended up living with my grandmother, and in trying to fill this void in my heart and trying to be loved and not knowing how to be loved, I was trying to win back over my boyfriend and ended up facing my own unplanned pregnancy. So for me,
that's right. I completely forgot about this. That's right. Okay. Keep going.
There's like a little bit of a gap in my career from where I got started in college to when I started working professionally, because I got pregnant, and it was a total surprise. But for me, I had never had an opinion about abortion, really. I was kind of one of those people who was like, well, I would never personally have an abortion, but you know, if someone else wants to, then fine. So when I got pregnant, I just knew I wasn't going to have an abortion, that I had this tiny little beautiful human inside of me, and I was going to try to be the best parent that I could. But we didn't get married right away. It was this on again, off again relationship. I was on WIC and Medicaid. I mean, just really, really struggled being back in my hometown and paying for my groceries with WIC in front of people that I'd gone to high school with. It was a really humbling experience, if not humiliating at times. And when my son was born, that was when everything kind of clicked for me, because I had this God awareness, right? Like I knew that God existed and that there was something bigger and beyond me. But when my son was born, that was when I really grasped the concept that God must love us so much more than we can possibly imagine. And I understood him as a heavenly father, because as a parent, when you look at your child, that immeasurable love and that unconditional love that you have, it's indescribable until you experience it. And then you can truly comprehend what that love must look like from God. So that triggers something in me to want to deepen my relationship with Christ and to introduce my child to Christ and make sure that he grew up in a home where he had a God awareness, no matter where he decided to go in his life. And I wanted to be married. I wanted him to grow up in a home where we loved each other, and we wanted to sanctify our relationship with marriage. And so I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart. It worked out. We've been together, oh my gosh, it'll be 20 years total that we've been working it out this year.
How does time fly even that fast? I just don't know. And I have to back up and say too, your thought about just how having your son really brought you closer to God. I have said this so many times on my channel. I had no idea how much having a child would just completely open up my eyes to, like, I guess the supernatural, for lack of a different phrase. I don't know, maybe better. When I birthed him and looked at him, I couldn't even believe it. I was like, a soul? Like, that was one of the first things that came out of me. I mean, I'm getting chill. The whole time you were talking, I just had chills. I was like, when I looked at him, the first thing I said pretty much was, how could you not believe in God, because it is so striking. I mean, I'm just getting chills after chills. It's so striking to have a person pop out of you. Like,
Oh, yeah.
how does that even happen? So even though, you know, I had a relationship with the Lord and I believed in God before having my son, I can resonate with you. This feeling of like, once they come out, it's just like, it is literally unexplainable until you do it. And it's not that other people don't experience deep love. It's that, like, literally, where did this person come from? And they're like part of your flesh. It's such a trip. So that's not surprising. And that's really cool to hear. So you guys, you had your son, you got married to your high school sweetheart. How amazing is that?
Well,
Well,
when
tell
you're
us.
together, when you're 16, you know,
Yeah.
you go to prom together and you graduate together and all these things. You're a very different person as an adult versus when you were at 16. So part of marriage, especially to someone that you loved when you were 16, is learning how to grow individually and not grow apart.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're different people. So learning to love that person in different ways and their growth. So we've had our ups and downs for sure, and it's been challenging, but we've always committed to our marriage throughout the difficult times as well. And after we got married was when I had actually gotten a job teaching middle school art because I needed insurance. I needed
Cool.
a stable job, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah.
And so I started teaching middle school art, and I remember talking to these kids in class and just saying, you know, if art is in your heart, then you have that passion for a reason, that God gives us all of our passions and our gifts for a reason. And you should use those to, you know, put out good in the world. And I'd go home and be like, I don't know if this is what I'm really supposed to do. And I had known that Wilmington, North Carolina had started to grow in the film industry. We had Dawson's Creek, One Tree Hill,
Oh,
lots of
okay.
parks movies. And I thought, well, maybe I can give this another go. I talked to my husband about it. So I was splitting time as a middle school teacher and then starting to dabble again in acting because my son had grown up some. He was 2. It was more manageable. And when I went out to Wilmington, I really not really I really gave my career to the Lord at that point and said, okay, God, like, I'm going to sacrifice this to you and hands out, you know, take it or leave it. And I'm just going to trust whatever happens. And I started working. My first role was just one line in a movie that most people have never seen. But from there, you know, it built. I feel like
Yeah.
humility has been the story of my life. I've learned a lot of humility through the years that I think has served me well in maintaining this groundedness, both in my faith and knowing my purpose in this industry.
Yeah, you've really so I interviewed a director like a week or two ago who we were talking about being scrappy and like working your way up and just doing whatever it takes. It sounds like, I mean, I know it's a little different because you had some life circumstances lead you to certain things where it was like, this is what I have, but it's kind of the same thing. It sounds like you really just, that humility and that scrappiness, you were like, I'm just going to do it and see what God does with this. That's so cool.
Oh yeah, if you don't go for it, then the answer is always no.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that once again, I'm using the word scrappiness and you use the word humility. I think that's better, like has served you even as you've, you know, gone past the one-liners. Like it serves you in all of your work when you experienced what it's like to not be so wealthy, to only have one line, you know, all of those things.
Well, I think it's grit too. I like to use the word grit.
Ooh, I like that.
You have to overcome
Yeah.
different obstacles to have grit, and grit is perseverance. So I like to use the word grit. I'm definitely gritty when it
That's
comes to
good. Yeah, I like that. It's another good synonym. Okay, so you started getting work, you took on the one-liner, and was it just kind of like you just started consistently booking things?
Yeah, it really was. I just kept working. I kept studying and more auditions, more bookings. And from there, I think in 2012 through, I don't know, it was like 2015 maybe was when I booked 2015 or 2016. I had booked 90 Minutes in Heaven, where I played one of Kate Bosworth's best friends in that movie. Hayden Christensen and Kate Bosworth. So I got screen time with her. And I was just working more consistently. My resume was building up, but I hadn't quite had that breakthrough yet. So in 2018, oh my gosh, this is so weird. I just lost all my lighting.
Yeah, I was
What
like,
just
what just
happened?
happened?
Oh my God, let's see.
Ooh, I see yours, your
That's
Lucille
what
Ball
we're talking
magazine.
about.
Yeah, like the glitches
Oh
out of
yeah.
nowhere. Hello?
These are part of my inspiration for why I am an actress. Yeah, so you see that now.
I love it.
Anyway, so it was
I'm
in
reading through
2000.
Lucille Ball's autobiography right now. So when I saw that, I was like,
Are
oh,
you really?
yeah, like she wrote a book
Oh
before she
yeah.
passed away. So I'm listening to it. Okay,
I'm
so
a
go
huge
on.
fan.
Oh,
Okay, so in 2018 was when I got a message from a person on Instagram who I didn't know who said, "Hey, Ashley, you don't know me, but I've been following your career and I've been praying for you. And I found out about this movie, and I think that the Lord has told me you're meant to play the role of this woman named Abby Johnson."
oh my gosh, I just got chills.
It's so random. I was like, yeah, okay, sure thing, lady.
Yeah.
So I kind of wrote her off and was like, oh, okay, you're so sweet. Because I didn't know. I mean, I go through my agent for different auditions, and this wasn't something that had come through my agent. And so I said to her, okay, well, thank you so much. 2 weeks later, she followed up again and just said, hey, did you ever audition for that movie? And I said, maybe you could have them send the audition piece to my agent or to my email. I'll check them out and see if I'm interested. And I read it and I wasn't busy. And so I thought, well, this is kind of an interesting couple pages. I mean, all I knew, I didn't know even that it was a pro-life movie. I had no idea who Abby Johnson was.
Whoa.
I knew that it was going to be based on a true story, but it was pro-choice, pro-life, like in the middle.
Okay.
And I just thought that her character was really fun. I resonated with her character because she was funny and witty and kind of spicy and feisty. And I thought, oh, this is fun. I'll do this audition. And so I sent it in. And then after the fact, which is something I should have done before the fact, I looked up Abby and I was like, okay, she's a real person. Let me find out more about her because I'm kind of interested. And when I heard her testimony about what she saw when a 13-week-old baby was aborted through an ultrasound guided procedure, I was just destroyed. I felt so blinded, so deceived that I'd had my own child, that I was this age and I had never known what happened during abortion. I mean, it literally destroyed me. I remember just crying and crying and crying. And that was when it hit my heart that it didn't leave me, that I felt very attached to this role. And that's something that you should never do in this industry.
Yeah.
Never ever get attached to an audition. You always audition and you let it go. And I had gotten really good at that, just forgetting about it. But this one would not leave me. And I just kept praying and it was in my heart. And a couple of weeks later was when I finally got a call that I was in top consideration. The producers called me and they were having a conversation with me at like 11 o'clock at night. They had to make a decision really fast. And I remember Carrie, one of the directors, he said to me, you realize if you take this role, you may never work again, that you might be blacklisted for the rest of your career. Your career is just starting, but you might be blacklisted. And I have finally gotten to the point in my life where I said, I don't care because I don't find my worth or my value in my projects. I don't serve directors and producers. I serve Jesus Christ and I know who I am. And they were like, okay, well, great. We have one other person in consideration. We'll let you know tomorrow. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Okay, I'll wait.
But as you know, it gets better. I ended up getting the role the next day. They said, hey, can you get on a plane and come to Oklahoma in 7 hours? It was just complete and total chaos. But I was prepared. My husband was prepared. We had talked about it. So I ended up getting on the plane and flying out to Oklahoma to film for 7 weeks.
Wait, you were starting filming in 7 hours.
Oh, well, I had 7 hours to get on the plane, and then we were going to be filming in 4 days.
Oh my God. It never ceases to amaze me how like the speed sometimes that takes place in this film. But it's like that dumb phrase is so appropriate, right? Hurry up and wait. It's like, oh my gosh, things will just pick up, but you're like, I bet it has been what, 7 years in the making or whatever.
Oh yeah. And they were so ready to book someone. They had been praying about who was going to play this role,
Wow.
and they had cast everyone else in the movie already. This was
Wow.
the last role they had cast, and that's very bizarre for a lead
Wow.
role. And they just happened to come across my headshot at the very last minute, and they were like, "Oh, she kind of looks like what we're looking for. Has she auditioned?" And then at the last minute, they had watched my audition, and then the next day they were like, "Okay, get on the plane."
That is so wild. I can hardly believe it that you had to you got it. Yay. Okay. See you in Oklahoma.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was insane because I had never met Abby. I had never read her book.
Wow.
I had 100, I think it was 105, 110 pages, and I was in almost every single scene of the movie. Had to start memorizing lines. It was crazy. And then as soon as I arrived in Oklahoma, it was back to back wardrobe fittings. They were coloring my hair. We
Oh
were
my gosh.
having producer meetings, meeting with an acting coach, just all kinds of crazy things. And that kind of led into my crazy God story, if you're familiar with that, about my mom.
No, I'm not familiar with
Oh,
this.
okay. Well, here's a good little juicy one for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I arrive in Oklahoma and I'm there for 4 days, right? So I've been working for 4 days. I'm about to go on set for my first day, and my mom calls me. And because I had left so fast, the only people who knew that I was gone were my husband, my son, and my sister. My
Wow.
mom had no idea that I'd left North Carolina and gone to Oklahoma to make a movie. And so I was getting ready to tell her about the movie, but I knew that she had had an abortion in high school. It was something she had openly shared.
Wow.
So I didn't want to hurt her by making this movie or make her feel judged in any way. But it was important to me to explain to her the grace and the redemption of Abby's story. So I start telling her about it. And I mean, just within a minute, she's sobbing, crying. And oh no. And she says, "Ashley, I need to tell you something that I've never told you before. What you don't know is when I was 19, I was in the abortion clinic for the
I do
second
know
time.
this.
I was in the abortion clinic for the second time. I got really sick to my stomach. I couldn't go through with it. I got up and I walked out and I chose to have you."
I
And
can't even.
it was
This all
absolutely
flashback. Keep
just
going.
mind blowing because I had no idea, right? I didn't even really have a stance on abortion until I had started researching for the movie, and I was very solid in where I stood.
Yeah.
But to hear that and to explain it to people, it's like a near-death experience where you realize that your life on this earth almost never existed. And then you start to think about the ripple effect of all the people in your life and this web and your husband and your child who would have never existed and the relationships that you've built. And that for me was how I processed what almost happened to me. It was a near death experience. I almost never had the ability to walk this earth. But beyond that, it was this overwhelming sense of gratitude and awareness that God is so real, because I felt like He had planned my life from the moment of conception to be there in that moment to tell that story.
Wow.
I mean, the odds of someone having that experience and being in that role, it's like, okay,
It's so slim.
like send me the stats. It's fine
Yeah.
if you want to try to figure it out. But to me, it's beyond coincidence. I felt very certain that God had a purpose, that I was meant to be there. And it was just affirmed over and over and over through that experience working on Unplanned. So that was just the beginning. And then so many other things happened throughout the course of it. We knew it was a special movie. But I mean, obviously, I felt like I was there for the right reason.
Yeah. I mean, so as you were telling that, clearly you could see on my face, it flashed back to me that I've seen you say that in an interview. And it was just as shocking to remember it this time as when I heard that the first time, because you're exactly right. Like, that's not everyone's story, first off, that their mom was like torn on the decision. But then the fact that you played that role is so, I'm so corny, but I just keep getting chills. Like, it's so beautiful and
Oh no, I usually
wild.
cry. I mean, I usually cry when I tell that story because I just feel so overwhelmed by the presence of God.
Overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming. Wow. Just so beautiful. So rewatching this movie, I don't know if there's any, I mean, I'm just going to say this, then if there's anything else you want to bring back in, you can, but I'm just speaking out loud. Rewatching this movie, one of the things that really stood out to me, and there were a lot of things that stood out, but you going through the procedures in the film. So the chemical, taking the pill in the bathroom, you know, by yourself, going through that, you know, as well as in the clinic. And I think that, so, okay, when I spoke to this director last week, one of the things I said to him, and I think you are friends with him. Brent McCorkle, does that ring a bell?
Oh yeah, he's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's a
So
revolution.
yes. So that's why we were talking and about, I can only imagine. And one of the things I said to him that I liked about those movies was that like, they didn't traumatize everyone, but they still like conveyed the story, like an adult subject matter. But then one of the things we said in it is like, well, you know, at the same time, sometimes it's like appropriate for, not that we're trying to traumatize people, but like for people to understand what's really happening here. And in the case of Unplanned, that's exactly how I felt, that those two scenes of her receiving those procedures, they're so, and of Abby seeing the procedure. I mean, all three of those scenes, Abby going through her treatments, seeing the procedure, like you said, at 13 weeks, it's so jarring, but like, not, I don't know how to word it, not in a good way, but in like a necessary way.
Yeah.
And I really, yeah, appreciate that the team and that you guys put that out there.
Well, there are some things, of course, that you can't unsee, but there are some things that you do need to see. And when I think back on history of some of the things that we needed to see, I don't know that the Holocaust would have ended the way that it did had we not known through images and video of what was happening. It could have just been kept in secret. Nobody could have seen it. I mean, obviously there were those who experienced it, but the mass widespread of seeing it and believing and understanding it changes things. And it's the same way with abortion. Most people have never, ever contemplated or understood what happens during an abortion. And with Unplanned, a lot of people don't know that the doctor in the abortion scene was a real abortionist who had performed like over 1,000 abortions, late term abortions even. And so it was very medically accurate. The woman who was the nurse in that scene was also a former abortion nurse. And we had the medical resources and the team to verify that everything that we were doing was medically accurate. So there are people who have disputed that. But if you actually research what happens during the procedure, then it's real. And that's the way it was.
I'm shocked at that. I had no idea, obviously, that any of those people working in those scenes had lived that out.
Yeah. Dr. Anthony, gosh, why can't I remember his name right now? I feel so bad. I can't remember his name, but his name Levitina, Anthony Levitina.
Good job.
He is the one who plays the doctor in that scene. And if you look up his testimony, you can hear about his transformation from an abortionist to a pro-life advocate.
I mean, I have chills again. Before, I don't even know if I should chime in with this, but before we go to the next thing, this is just what's on my mind. So I had a miscarriage at 10.5 weeks last year, and no one in my family, I mean, not many women in my family have miscarried. It was obviously not expected. One of the many things that came out of that experience was also just getting to see my baby. I've talked about this before, that The Guardian, released that article in the last 6 months saying pictures of what a baby really looks like at 10.5 weeks. And they're these close-up shots, and it's a complete lie. Because the way that my miscarriage ended up panning out, I actually kind of had a little bit of a heads up beforehand from my sister-in-law once we figured out what was going on. And she had said to me, I wish I hadn't lost everything in the toilet. You're going to bleed a lot. You're going to lose a lot. And so I went to the tub, and I actually had the miscarriage in the tub. And because of that, I was able to actually hold my baby. I saw my baby. And so to see what parts of the mainstream media are willing to put out there and say is true, when I've had my own experience now, knowing that is blatantly not true, definitely opened up my eyes in a different way to the battle that's going on in media and in people's mind as to what this really is and what's really in our body. So yeah, I really appreciated all of those scenes that you guys you know, they were imperative to that movie. And especially after seeing it again, it was like, this wouldn't have been the same film if all of those scenes were not in there. Abby's scene, you know, when she witnessed the abortion, and then the other two. So yeah, thank you for all of that and your work and your vulnerability. The emotion that you brought to those scenes was so raw and powerful, and just really well done. Just well done.
Well, thank you. I think that's immersing yourself in the reality of the situation and understanding the complexity and the depth and the trauma of it, and going to that place every single time, and to be really honest and to help people experience that through media. I think that actors have to be very vulnerable in that sense.
Yeah, and you did, and it was really great. You're welcome. So you did Unplanned. When it wrapped, I mean, were you like, all right, here we go? Like, was it just hang on tight while this releases? Like, what was that like when that came out?
You know, there was no warning ahead of time that I would be some sort of pro-life activist or I would be speaking. There was none of that. But what I did know is they were preparing me for a press tour. I started meeting with people who were drilling me with questions because they knew that the media was going to grasp onto this and they wanted me to be prepared. But I felt like because of the research I had done with the movie and all that I had learned, that I was ready to answer those hard questions. I even had the producers send me to the Vida Institute at Notre Dame, which is a pro-life summit, essentially, where you meet with leaders from around the world and you discuss all different aspects of the pro-life movement, from theology to law to philosophy. I mean, there's just so many aspects of it. And so I went and trained there essentially for about a week to be able to be prepared for the media. And so when the media caught wind of my story, this is how it all became this whirlwind. I wrote an op-ed on Fox News about my experience with my mother and what happened. And that op-ed got printed on Fox News, and the next day it was trending at #1 on Apple. So when you looked at the Apple News and you like scroll your phone, you flip over. My sister comes running in my room and she's like, "Oh my gosh, your op-ed is #1 on Apple News." It was crazy.
Like, here we go.
But so many people just resonated with that story and were blown away. And we're like, what is this movie? And so the very next day, Fox News called me for my first appearance. And I went on and started talking about the movie. And that was the beginning. From, I think it was maybe December was when it happened. November, December was that first interview. And then from that time through March and thereafter, all the way the rest of the year, 2019, I just kept media interview after media interview talking about it, because we also premiered at the time that New York was passing major liberal legislation for pro-abortion.
So this is when they were probably like lighting the buildings pink and
it was exactly that time. So it was at the height of the conversation. And so it just put me in the forefront. Despite being an actress, I had my own voice and I had educated myself enough that I felt comfortable speaking on behalf of the movie and the pro-life movement. And from there, things just kind of exploded. You know, there are certain people I'm sure that never want to work with me in Hollywood, which is, you know, it is what it is. It's unfortunate because I feel like we're supposed to be in this industry the most tolerant, and we tell stories as actors, right? And that sometimes the stories aren't always stories that are agreeable. People play villains all the time. So I think as an actress, this role in particular was very challenging and complex. And so I had a lot of hope that people would at least respect that. And I did have conversations with people that I never thought that I would be able to meet in the industry because of this movie. And then, of course, there were other people who I've never heard from that maybe behind the scenes are blacklisting me. But I do know that from Unplanned was when I decided to take more control of my career. And that leads into the next chapter of my life.
Which I was just going to say, it's very inspiring where it all ended up seemingly taking you next. I have lots of questions about that. I will say, though, it is also, not to keep showering you in compliments, but it's also very inspiring to see, like you said, coming out of that film, how you just like put on the coat of like activist, if that's what we want to say. Like you just stepped up And I feel like every interview I've seen of yours, you're bold and you're willing to say truth, but you don't have like an aggressive spirit about you just in general. You just say it how you feel like it is. And it's really beautiful that you had the guts and the strength to step up after that and bring that out of the movie, even because obviously the message is a real life message, but you brought it out. That's really cool.
Well, I appreciate that, because I think prior to doing the movie, I might have had more of an aggressive heart. I'd be like, Jesus,
Oh,
disabled. But
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
he works on me, and I felt like this is an issue of the heart. Abortion is an issue of the heart.
Yeah.
And to be able to reach people, they want to be heard, they want to be seen, and they want to feel loved. And so
Yes.
for me, it was always important to speak truth and love.
Yeah, it's amazing how God just builds our story, and like all these things just build on top of each other. And so often you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, I was totally equipped for this because of X, Y, and Z back there. You know, it's wild. You said that your work on Unplanned in general just like kind of took you to another spot in your career where you felt like you wanted to, like, I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you said almost take ownership of it and really like make things happen. Am I rephrasing that, or is that pretty accurate?
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. I had decided after doing Unplanned that the direction of my career really mattered. I wanted to tell stories that were important to me, and I wanted it to be meaningful. Aside from that, I'm a mother and a wife, and when you go make a movie, you're away from your family for a long time. Doing Unplanned in particular, we'd filmed for 7 weeks, but beyond that, I was on a press tour for almost a year and a half. We went to 5 different countries. Oh yeah, 5 different countries. I spoke in over 30 different states, speaking at pregnancy resource centers. I was gone a lot.
Wow.
So for me, it was a matter of saying, if I am going to do something, it needs to mean something to me, and it needs to be special. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be some big epic drama. It could be a rom-com, or, it could be anything, but it needed to mean something to me personally.
Yeah.
So after I did Unplanned, Chuck and Carrie, who were the directors and producers of Unplanned, they had really poured into me on set. And they encouraged me and said, you would be an amazing producer. I'm just a problem solver by nature. So anytime there was a problem on set, I'd be like, well, why don't we do it this way? Or how about if we like move
Got it.
It's like totally not my job and probably annoying at times.
It's that grit.
It is. Like, I like to solve problems, like I like to be efficient, and that's part of a producer's job. So you're constantly putting out fires and problem solving and coming up with solutions.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, I love working with actors. I was a teacher at a studio for a long time with actors, beginning actors, and they noticed the way that I worked with other actors on set. And so they were like, we think you'd also be a great director. Maybe you should explore these avenues beyond just acting.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, well, they didn't warn me how hard it is. They were just like, you're really good at it.
You're great.
Thanks. So in my my optimistic naivety, I went out and started looking at scripts to option, and I had joined a site called Coverfly, which is essentially a database of scripts that screenwriters submit that you're able to peruse as a producer. And I started reading, just like, I think I'd gotten to like 100 scripts. I had set different filters, and I was getting really frustrated because a lot of them just had content I wasn't excited about, or they were just really badly written. And I came across this one, Pharma, and I was absolutely blown away and just smitten by it. It was totally happenstance. And the script, which is beyond me that it had not been discovered prior, was in the top 10% of the Academy's Nickel Fellowship. So it already had some clout to it.
I don't even know what that means.
So the Academy, the Oscars, essentially, the Academy has a fellowship where they look at screenplays, and if you place within a certain percent of submissions, different things happen. And if you get the top, then of course, these screenplays get made, and they're usually Oscar worthy. It had also been a finalist in the Austin Film Festival, which has seen a lot of Oscar winners come out of the Austin Film Festival. I mean, there was all kinds of things, and it was still in submission mode. So it was still being submitted to all kinds of festivals. And I reached out to the screenwriter immediately and was like, hey, I want to discuss optioning this content and producing it.
Wow.
I'm a very fair person. I think that Dory, the screenwriter, would say this, and I always treat people as I mean to go. Like I don't, and I mean that in the sense that I don't lowball people. I don't think that that's the ethical thing to do. I think you just start
Yes.
to go and you do business in a way that you're not having to negotiate a million times. You just treat
Yes.
people properly.
Yeah.
So we had developed a relationship where we established some trust, and she agreed to option the script to me, and that was in
Wow.
January of 2020.
Wow.
3 years in the making. But what happened in January 2020, when I started my production company, Simple Jane Films, to be able to start optioning content
Yeah.
and get pharma under my belt, we entered into a pandemic in March.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that are interesting about that. One is the fact that this movie is about big pharma, and I
Mhm.
optioned it before the world went crazy.
That is so ironic and wild.
So I think it's a very timely story, and to be able to get my hands on it prior to that was incredible. And it's the true story of Dr. Frances Kelsey, for those who don't know, and she was one of the first whistleblowers at the FDA. She was assigned a drug called thalidomide to review for FDA approval, and it was being given to women as a sedative and for morning sickness. There were a lot of loopholes in drug regulation in the 1960s that allowed pharmaceutical companies to hand out samples without FDA approval. So there was essentially no record of these doctors handing out the samples. They knew they were doing it, but there was like somewhere around 2 million pills, I think.
Wow.
That, on this, it might have been one, but 1 to 2 million pills that were handed out in the US to these women.
Wow.
And while it was going through FDA approval, it was not FDA approved yet. But Frances Kelsey didn't feel like there was enough evidence to support that it was safe.
Yeah.
And in doing her own research, she was threatened by Big Pharma. She was threatened by the FDA to say, just approve it, rubber stamp it. And one of the reasons is because she discovered that they were being bribed. The pharmaceutical companies were pouring millions of dollars into the FDA and working hand in hand in cahoots with doctors who were falsifying testimonies. They were buying pharmaceutical sales reps and FDA workers Rolexes and all kinds
Oh
of
my gosh.
golf clubs. I mean, it really was an old boys club at this time, and they were just feeding each other. They were working, as a for-profit corporation meddling with a government entity to approve drugs that are supposed to be safe for the American people. And Frances Kelsey refused to back down. She discovered that it had come from a German pharmaceutical company called Grunenthal, who happened to employ multiple Nazi war criminals. And the reason I mention this is because I believe that creates an atmosphere where there's a lack of value placed on life, and it becomes all about profits over people. Because
wait, what do you mean? Oh, the fact that there were the Nazis?
Yes,
yes.
Because if you are a convicted Nazi war criminal, you obviously don't have respect for life.
You're obviously willing to take orders too.
And there are some theories that thalidomide may have been developed in concentration camps. So in doing her research, she also started to uncover that overseas babies were being born without arms and legs.
I can't.
A couple had started to be born in the US, and she made the correlation, took it to the FDA, and finally, after she blew the whistle, went to the Washington Post. The Washington Post, when journalism was honorable, they ran the story, and JFK caught wind of it. He had the pharmaceutical companies go door to door and pull the drug out of the homes that it had been given to that they knew of, and he awarded her one of the highest civilian medals. Now,
wow,
is the craziest part to me of all of it is that I never heard of her. This woman who essentially changed the face of global drug regulation and set the golden standard has been just completely almost erased in history. We don't learn about her in history class. It's not something we talk about.
No.
It's baffling to me. And so when I heard this story, I was immediately drawn to it, and I knew that I wanted to make sure the world knew about Frances Kelsey.
I mean, it's so, like you said, the timing is so good. Of course, maybe you've picked up on this from my YouTube. Or from my Instagram, I am of the perspective that it's not a coincidence that we hadn't heard of her. I think that there's been a lot of stuff go down in the last few years that has brought a lot of shadiness to light, potentially within big pharma, or just the way that pharma's possibly in cahoots with the government, all of that. And that's a big part of why I'm so passionate about you doing this project. Like sometimes when I'm commenting on your stuff, I'm like, I feel like I'm like an obnoxious fangirl of the pharma page. I'm like, yes,
we love it.
But I feel like I am a representation of a whole slew of women that are in this same group with me that are like, yes, there's a problem. And everyone that has pointed at us over the last few years, which I know we're not trying to get off in the weeds too much, but as possibly being just conspiracy theorists, it's like, hey, we'll find out. Time will shake out what's going on here. But to point at people like us who have questions without realizing that there are legitimate reasons and things that have gone on in the past to lead us to this point, to not know about that is criminal in and of itself. The whole time, the last few years, I've just been like, man, this is not the first, like we're being painted as crazy, but this has happened before. And that's, even if we want to say that's not what's happening now, it doesn't make us crazy for wondering if what has happened in the past will happen again.
Absolutely. Especially when people don't know. And I think that healthy skepticism is mandatory.
Yes, totally.
You must have healthy skepticism, especially when it comes to government health and giant corporations meddling in that government entity. Which we know there are swinging doors between the FDA and pharmaceutical companies. We know that these people switch all kinds of positions and intermingle. I mean, but you can look it up. It's not like I'm saying something that's not on record that you can find. And I think that telling stories like this do help people realize that there have been problems in the past that perhaps are not being addressed or have changed. I also think that stories like in shows like Dope Sick or The Dropout.
I don't know that show.
You don't know Dope Sick?
No, now I gotta write this down.
It's about the opioid epidemic.
Oh man.
Yes. So that and along with The Dropout, where this woman and she just went to trial. She basically created a pharmaceutical or machine.
Oh, The Dropouts with what's her name? Yeah, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it essentially did nothing.
She managed to fool all of these people. I mean, that's such a good example too, because I feel like so many things throughout history, if we don't even know it, it's so easy to think that we are advanced beyond some type of moral, like, oh, those people of the past, those stupid people, or those people that had no morals, like we're so much more advanced than them. But that's exactly it. It's like, that's a primo example. How did she get into contracts with Walgreens? Like billions of dollars with some of the biggest investors in the country, men that have sat in some of the highest military roles in the US, invested in her company. And that just happened. And now she's serving prison time. And once again, I'm very conspiratorial to be like, well, that was an easy blame. Like she's one person, you got to make a show out of her, whatever. But I think the general story is exactly what we were just saying, that it's good for people to know like what has happened. And how it played out, just to be aware, like human nature, people get bribed with Rolexes.
People also, I think, like to blindly trust that everyone has good intentions.
Yeah.
The reality is people don't, especially people in high power positions. And Dope Sick actually touches on that. I mean, the pharmaceutical company knew that this was causing addiction and they weren't doing anything about it. And that's why there was a settlement. I mean, it's huge and it's being repeated in history. And I love that pharma and Dr. Kelsey's story is something that can't be disputed because it's already happened. It's in history and it's not something that people can go, oh, this is made up. Our screenwriter actually went to the Washington archives and pulled documents from Frances Kelsey's file and the FDA to make sure it is as historically accurate as possible. Of course, there are always going to be creative liberties taken to tell stories, but when it comes to the root of this story, we are definitely honoring the work that she did at the FDA.
I am like so hyped that you're making this film. Like I said, all my little hype comments on Instagram, I'm like, yes, I really am just looking forward to it. And I think it's really important that this film is made, because I don't know. I don't see, how do I phrase this? I don't know that like a big Hollywood production is going to be taking any, like, not that you're taking shots at the pharmaceutical industry, but you're recounting its history. And I don't know when that would happen in a big Hollywood film. And so the fact that like you've had all these things lead up in your life, becoming a mother, like you said, being in these like kind of humbling positions in your past where you really had to just like deal with the toughness of reality, and then getting unplanned and going on tour for a year and a half, just everything that led to the next thing. I think it's so perfect and appropriate that you're spearheading this project. And I love that you're just like, okay, this might sound weird too, but that you're committed to make it happen. And that even though it's been 2 years, you're not like, oh, it's been 2 years, like too long. You're still on the path. I mean, I made a joke with my mom the other day, and this is the part that I'm like, I hope you don't find this annoying. But I was talking to my mom about this film because she's super excited about it too. Like I take after her in the, and all this stuff. And I said, Mom, what's so cool, and I hope that this doesn't take too long, but I was like, even if it takes a minute for her to get this made, like you're also not aging out of it. Like it's so appropriate for so many reasons for you to be taking this and making it happen. Yeah. It's really cool.
Well, I will say that has been a huge problem. It is 3 years now. So 3 years.
Gotcha.
We had some major streamers, major streaming services. One in particular told us that the movie was too dark for their platform. Okay. First of all right. And then we had an LOI from a major theatrical.
What is LOI?
A letter of intent.
Okay.
That said basically they were very interested in the movie, but they had certain things and requirements for them to move forward with distribution. So there were so many hoops to jump through, so much red tape that we didn't feel like we were getting anywhere. And so the way that we needed to move forward was to get the public's support, because even some investors have been a little bit lukewarm or tepid when it comes to investing. I met with one investor who I was like baffled that she had even taken the meeting, because afterwards she was like, oh yeah, well, one of my family members is high up at Pfizer. And I was like, okay, like this might not be the movie for you to invest in. I'm not saying like anything about Pfizer, but like
no, I know. Well, that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about the streaming platform saying it's a little dark. I'm just thinking brought to you by Pfizer. Not really, but it's just
or Johnson and Johnson. Like we talked about like the lawsuits against Johnson and Johnson. I think maybe that's who it was. It was Johnson and Johnson that she was really. Anyway, so bringing this to the public, which is through Angel Studios. So I hope all of the people watching this will understand, your followers understand, that to help make this movie happen, we are offering an investment opportunity to the general public.
This is what I was going to ask you about. Okay, keep going.
So as the general public, most people don't typically have the opportunity to invest in film. It's usually reserved only for accredited investors who are very, very wealthy.
Yeah.
Well, with crowdfunding investment, it allows the general public to invest, I don't know, like $100 into a movie. And it's not just like a t-shirt. It's not a donation. It's an investment. So these people actually own part of the movie with us.
That's so
and our
cool.
goal is to raise $5 million through the general public. Wow. And that offering will be going live very, very soon. We've been in a period of what's called testing the waters to see if people are interested.
Okay, so that's what it is on the site. They're like potential pledges.
Yeah. So what we found is that there's a very big interest in making this film. On Facebook, our proof of concept has been viewed like 1 million times, something crazy.
Wow.
50,000 comments. People are just absolutely loving it, insane over this project. And so very, very soon, now that the studio, Angel Studios, has determined there is significant interest in making the movie, the offering will be going live where people can put their money in and actually own a piece of the movie. It'll be a limited time frame. There are limited shares to be able to do it, but this is the opportunity where people can own a piece of the movie.
That's so cool. So 2 things. Three things. First off, I obviously am going to have those links down below for you guys to check out. The second thing is, if you don't know this, Angel Studios is the same company that produced The Chosen. So if you guys are just wondering kind of what projects they've done or what space they're in, that's kind of one of the bigger things that they've done recently. Gosh, that show's well done. And then the third thing, oh, that's right. On the investment page, I thought it was so cool seeing the way that you guys broke down just return on investment for films that are like true stories and based on actual people. And I thought that was really interesting to see like the amount of investment that go into these films versus oftentimes the amount of return, and how like over time these movies tend to stand the test of time. So from an investment perspective, that's really cool to see too, that you can shoot something like this in a lower budget and potentially have a higher return.
Well, that's how I feel biopics perform really well, is because they, again, stand the test of time. I feel like when we look back on movies that we watch later or over and over, a lot of times they're true stories and people are really connected to those. So we really hope that's the same. You know, there's obviously never any guarantee. Investment. But
everything's a gamble.
And so if I describe this movie to people, though, I say it's Aaron Brockovich set at the FDA in the 1960s.
That's so good. I love that.
And I feel like that's kind of where we are with it. It's a very Aaron Brockovich type story.
Yeah, that's funny. I was thinking about that maybe like a month or two ago, and then I started seeing some Aaron Brockovich on my YouTube serving to me. I was just thinking about the comparison. I was like, are they reading my brain? So that's funny that you say that, though. Yeah, I'm just so excited to see this project move forward. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it was your powerful acting, or it's the aura that's coming to me from across the US. But in general, I just feel like you're the right person to make this happen. And I love that the directors that you worked with on Unplanned really encouraged you to get into the production side of things and start your own production company. I just think that's so inspiring. And even though like I always felt the same way in acting, and that's part of why I'm a YouTuber, it was this feeling of like, man, I love telling stories. I love connecting with people, but I want it to mean something for me. And so the fact that you've been able to do this, to run with it, you're making it happen. I think you're the right person. I'm really excited about this project.
Well, thank you. We're excited too.
You're welcome. So I'm going to link all of that, like I said, down below, all of Ashley's, socials, and for the fundraiser for pharma. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you feel like you want to say? Any kind of goodbye? Is there anything I didn't touch on you'd like to touch on?
We talked about so much.
I know we did, and I could just keep going.
Well, I just want people to know that the answer is always no, unless you ask. So unless you go for it, then it's never going to be a yes. So you have to go for it, and all of your failures can lead up to your success. Never chalk it up as to not being able to get to where you want to go, because I feel like my life story is an example of the testament of time and the perseverance and the grit that it takes to get to where you want to go. And I'm not quite there yet, but I'm not giving up.
Yes, that's so amazing. There's this phrase I heard recently. I've been drawing so many comparisons to I've been finding a lot of, I don't know, comparisons and hope and encouragement in nature recently. And about a year and a half ago, I had this click in my head that when you're gardening, even if you're doing everything perfectly right, your soil's the perfect pH, the minerals, whatever, it's like time is that irreplaceable element, no matter how right you're doing it. And that's what that made me think of, that's exactly what the time has to play out.
That's so right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Ashley, I just appreciate you taking the time to get on with me. And I was so excited to talk to you, and this did not disappoint. And I just appreciate it. And I'm so excited for everything you're doing.
Likewise. Well, thank you so much, Nikki.
Thank you, Ashley. Bye, guys.